Yes, the environment, you can say, contains the habitat of an organism. Okay, everything around an organism is the environment. Now
Yes.
their habitat also is present in their environment. Yeah.
Then we went to biomes. Biomes are created due to regional and regional variation like temperature, rainfall, precipitate, etc. There are a few biomes like deserts, tropical forests, temperate forests, tundra, grasslands, and sea coastal regions.
Yes. And we also define it on the basis of their, so what is the, so what factors define biomes, Safula?
Temperature, precipitate, rainfall, and all.
Yes, so on the basis of, if the temperature is high, precipitation is also high, it can be a tropical rainforest. Temperature is moderate, slightly high, but the precipitation is also moderate, it's temperate, and so on, right? This is how we define the biome, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, now in biomes, coming to niche. Okay, so niche is, you had a doubt in niche. So when we say niche, it is more specialized a region in habitat where which is defined by the following factors. Okay, for example, saying a tropical forest is a very big, like there can be the tropical region. In in the tropical region, not all the regions are forest. Even inside a tropical forest, not all the regions of the tropical forest behave the same or have the same conditions always throughout. So niche is defined by the following factors. First is, for every organism, its niche can be determined or defined by the range that that organism can tolerate. Now, range of the abiotic conditions, for example, range of the pH, range of the water, humidity, rainfall, etc. Okay, for example, in tundra, so if some organisms live in tundra, that then that organism, can it survive in temperate? It may or may not. If it has a very low range of conditions that it can tolerate, so let's say it can only tolerate temperature between 0 to 5 degrees or 0 to 10 degrees, so maybe in temperate, which is 10 to 20, it won't survive, correct? But if it can survive a range between 0 to 20, so it can also survive in the tundra, and it can also survive in the temperate. Do you understand? So that's how the niche is defined. Also, the diversity of resources that are available for the organism in that habitat. Okay, so for example, if there is a particular type of a herbivore organism and it only will eat the leaves of X plant, let's say XYZ plant, but can it also eat the leaves of some other plant and survive, or it can just eat the leaves of this particular species and cannot eat the leaf of other particular species, etc. Okay, so diversity of resources which are available, and also what matters is how much of that diversity the animal is able to utilize. Okay, so and third is functional role or the importance of the organism in its ecological system. So if that organism is something very important, a major predator, let's say, okay, so its niche will not only be defined, but also will be governed by that organism in many ways. So you can understand that how important is a predator in a grassland. Okay, yes or no? So a tiger is very important to maintain the balance of the ecosystem in a particular region, right? So do you understand that,
Yes,
Saifullah?
sir.
Yeah, so these three factors then decide the niche for that particular organism. So niche is for an organism, habitat is again for an organism, the whole population, but niche is very organism specific, and it is defined by these three factors that are given. Okay,
Okay, sir.
yeah, yeah. So can you, would you like to continue the summary?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Then we study about factors affecting an organisms. They
Mhm,
are biotic and abiotic.
mhm.
In abiotics, they are temperature, water, light, and soil.
Yes, correct.
Um,
Then we
then we
talked
went to
about
population.
populations. Yes.
Population is a group of individual organisms that live in a well-defined geographical region and share, compete, or for similar resources. They also potentially interbreed among themselves.
Yes. I also told you that the point of potentially interbreeding among themselves is quite um, flexible, correct? Because even a bacterial population is a population, but they don't interbreed among themselves. Or for that matter, all asexually reproducing organisms do not interbreed among themselves, but still can give rise to a population. Yes. Then coming to
Yes.
population attributes.
The first population attribute is birth and death rates.
Mhm,
Um it says the per capita of birth and deaths. Um, for example, you can see as tiger population in 2022 it was 50 tigers, but
mhm.
in 2023 the number increased by 10. So we can find out the birth percentage by um, number of birds by the total population previous years.
Yes,
Like,
so number of births or number of addition, yeah, number of births. Yes, you're right. Upon the initial population. So instead of using the total population, you have to use the initial population with which we started. Okay,
yes,
Saifullah?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, continue.
Next is sex ratio.
Mhm.
It basically says the ratio of males and females in a population.
Yeah.
And the next is age distribution or age group.
Mhm.
It is a diagrammatical representation of an age distribution in a population. There could be of three cases: expanding population, stable population, or declining population.
Correct. Continue.
The expanding population is when the number of population increases day by day.
And
It
what
is
is the
due to,
characteristic of that population?
and they have reproductive stages more than post-reproductive stages.
Yeah, pre-reproductive stage. The pre-reproductive stage has to be more
Yes, sir.
than the reproductive and post-reproductive stages, because that is the one that is going to come to the reproductive stage, right, and produce more offsprings. The reproductive
Yes.
ones will become post-reproductive, and the post-reproductive one will die. Yeah. Okay. And
And the
then
stable
stable.
population in which reproductive stage and pre-reproductive stage are equal. There be no, there be equal number
Yes.
of births and deaths. And the next one is declining population in which the post reproductive stage is in majority.
Yes. Right. So here you can say the other way, the pre-reproductive stage, the population in the pre-reproductive stage is lesser than the population in the reproductive stage. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So related to that, thank you so much, Saifullah, for the summary. And in today's class, we will be talking about. So this is the homework that I gave you. Did you go back? I told you that today's class is going to be a little mathematical heavy, so you have to pay attention to it. Did you go back and read these things a little bit at least? No. Okay. Anyways, so I'll try my best. And if you find any difficulty anywhere, please stop me and um, ask. So today we are going to talk about population growth. Okay, so these were the population growth, different types, where we saw that population growth can be positive in expanding population, the growth can be negative in a declining population. Okay, so let's start with today's 10th December. Population growth. Correct. Okay, so if I ask you very simply, what do you think? What factors do you think? So let me say that there is a fixed population that I started with. Okay, like giving an example, the 50 tigers that we used in the last example. Okay, so there is a fixed population, so that population will have a fixed population density, correct? So I'll call it n. This fixed population density, I'm calling it n. Okay, now what all things do you think can affect the population? We studied about two, birth rate and death rate. So do you think birth rate affect a pre-existing population density? Yes, it has the capability to make a population grow further and make it a expanding population. Yes or no? Correct?
Yes, sir.
So this factor, whatever affects positively, it has a positive effect on the population. Sorry. The birth factor has a positive effect. Okay, it's not working out yet. Let's wait for some time, people. Can you see the screen? It's misbehaving for me. Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me share it again. Just one moment. Give me one moment, babe. Okay, but in the meanwhile, tell me, what do you think affects a population? So, or very specifically, tell me, how do you think birth and death affects a population? Yes, it's back. So let me share. Anyone? You all can see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think this is what you were seeing before as well, right? Could not see anything else, which I wrote here. Okay, anyways, so I wrote that let's start with the existing population density. Okay, so this population density, let me call it n, any population density. Let's start with this 50 tigers, 100 rabbits, something else. So how do you think birth rate will affect it, or birth will affect it? Positively, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we call it natality. Natality and mortality are two terms. Natality means birth, the birth rate. And let me call it as B because it's birth. Because if we have already used N for population density, so I'm not using N for natality. Okay, natality or birth. If you will forget it, please write it as birth. And how do you think death is going to affect this population? Positively or negatively?
Negatively. Negative.
negatively. So whatever affects negatively, we'll place this sign of stop sign, this sign. So there is a negative connotation with death, and I'll call it mortality. Mortality rate is death rate. Okay, so this is there. I'll just write for your simplicity death here. And let's take this as D. This factor is D. Anything else that you think can affect a population density apart from birth and death? So let's say nothing is, like, it's something is not taking birth or not dying, but still the population is increasing. What could be the reason? Without the birth, if a population is increasing, what could be the reason?
More people are coming from other parts of the world.
Yes. So currently the population, let's say, of Qatar, where the FIFA World Cup is happening, a lot of people are there, right? It's not because of birth, because it's, so what do we call that thing? Coming of people or coming of individuals in a population from outside? We call it immigration, right? Immigration
Yes,
is a real term. Immigrants, immigration. So this factor, immigration, let's define it as I. Let's say this is I. It also has a positive effect on the population. Anything that can similarly going out from population will affect negatively, right? So that is known as emigration. If from the original population some individuals left, so that's emigration, and that affects the population negatively. So now, keeping this in mind, we have 4 things that affects a population. Okay, this is a very simplistic approach we are starting with. We will keep making it complex over time mathematically, but let's talk about this. So
so what's the
now,
symbol for immigration?
emigration. Okay, yes, right. Let's make a symbol. Let's take E. We have not taken E anywhere, right? E. So let's take E here. Okay. So if N is the population density at time T, so this N was in, let's say, 2022. So let's define the parameters. In mathematics, we always do that, right? How many of you all have studied maths till class 10th at least? Who still have mathematics with them? Can just raise their hands in the chat. Those who have mathematics. Mamuna, Saifullah has, and Mamuna, you also have mathematics?
Yes.
Yes, great. So I'll expect some help from both of you. So let's say if N is the population density, okay, at time T. So N is equal to population density at time T. So how I'm going to write it? I'm going to write it as NT, right? N at time T, right? This is how we write it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now I want to find what will be the change in that population. So that is what growth is about, right? Whether that change be positive or negative, whether the population will expand or decline, all those studies need to find what? We need to find NT plus 1. Okay. So this is called N at given time T. And if I have to find N T plus 1, what does it means? It means the population density at time T plus 1. So whatever is the time, if it is year 2022, then I'm finding it at T plus 1, which is year 2023. If it is a bacterial population whose size we are figuring out at first hour number 1, then T plus 1 will be at the second hour. Okay, after 2 hours. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So if I have to find NT plus 1, then it will be equal to NT, because NT will always be there. This is what we started with. And what will add to it in a positive manner? Can I now say that NT plus, so birth, which is B, plus immigration, which is I. Okay. And I will subtract from this whole thing what? Death plus emigration, because they will impact negatively. Can I do this? Does this equation make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Have I written it correct? So I will go to Mamuna and Safula for like corrections and proofreading. Is this correct mathematically, Mamuna and Safula?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So now just pay attention here. This was affecting the population positively, correct? And this was affecting this population, NT. Now this was affecting the NT negatively, correct? And whatever is the result of this interaction, this combination, so if there is more birth than death and more immigration than emigration, then this part will be more, this part will be higher. Let's say this is 10 minus 2, so it will be 8. So NT plus 1 will be NT plus 8. So whatever is NT, let's say if it is 100, so it will be 108 after T plus 1. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So this is the simplistic way of writing what will happen, how will population density will increase or decrease, okay, at different conditions. Now in nature, so how do we study this? We have designed growth models in mathematics. They are based on this simple concept itself. So this is the concept, okay, this is the main concept on which these models are based. They are called population growth models. In today's class, we will be focusing on these models. There are two which we have to focus on and understand. Okay, that is the aim of today's class. Okay, with respect to time. So the first mathematical model that we will focus on is called exponential growth model. Exponential growth model. So what do we mean by exponential? Anyone? Mathematics? Yes. Specifically Mamuna and Safla. So you are the leaders, the torch bearers. Help. What do we mean by exponential?
It's the power of the number.
The power of the number. So what do we mean by exponential growth, if I ask? Can you give me any example, biological example, where growth happens exponential, or any, forget about biological example. Tell me a number series where it is growing exponentially. Let's start with 1. If I want to grow 1, I have one apple to begin with. I want to grow my stock of apples exponentially. So what will be the series? If I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is this exponential growth? It is growth because from 1 I reach till 5, but is it exponential growth or no?
No.
No. Okay. Then what is an exponential growth? If I start from 1.
1, then 4, then 9, then 16, like that.
1, then 4, 9, 16. Okay, but it does not have a proper.
So 1, 2, 4, 16, and so on. Squares upon, right?
Yeah. So what you are doing here, Alan, right?
We're
That's a very
squaring
good.
it. Yes, so we're squaring it.
Yes, you are at every given stage, you are just doubling it, right? I'm not wrong. 1,
No.
then you're taking 2.
Now, yeah,
Okay.
doubling it.
Yeah, doubling it. So because 1 into 1, if you're squaring 1, 1 into 1 will be.
So starting with 2, to be honest, 2, 4, and 16. So that's a square.
Correct. So even if from 2, so 2, if you double 2, it's 4. If you double 4, it's 8. If you double 8, it's 16. Then 32, 64, so on.
Yeah.
So that's what is called as exponential growth or exponential number series. It has also another name. Remember mathematician, those who have mathematics? It's called a
Logistic.
geometric.
Okay, no mind.
It's called a geometrical growth because it has a geometry to it. Correct? It if you draw it, it will look like a pyramid. It has a geometry. Correct? 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Every time it will keep getting doubled. So it will grow into a geometrical fashion. Make sense? So it's called a geometrical growth as well. Now let's see what do we mean by exponential growth or geometrical growth. So when we allow any organism's population to just keep growing without any constraint, and we see that till some time in a bacterial population. Okay, so where food, space, and all these things do not have any constraint. So it is a ideal growth condition. It is a hypothetical or a theoretical growth condition, because naturally it can never happen that an organism has no constraint on its growth. Can it happen? Do you think that grasses in a field grow without any constraint? They just continuously keep growing forever? No, right? What is the constraint for grasses? Availability of water, rains. Also, there are cattle or herbivores animal which will come and eat grasses, or due to some factors or reasons, these grasses will be uprooted and die. Things like that. Even in a bacterial population where we are providing everything to a bacteria continuously, we can keep them growing exponentially for some time, but after some time, whatever condition we give them, they will saturate for that condition. They will reach a maximum number, a maximum population density, which is called the carrying capacity. Okay, we'll talk about it later in the next model. But to begin with, this is a ideal growth model. Everyone understands that?
Yes, sir.
Why it's an ideal growth model? Okay, so write down. Exponential growth model explains the ideal growth. Exponential growth model explains the ideal growth explains the ideal growth when the resources availability which includes food and habitat, which is space, food and habitat, is unlimited. Okay, so we are assuming these things to make a model, to make a mathematical growth model. Unlimited resources availability. Okay, we are also considering that there is no significant death that leads to, or no extinction or mass death, no disease. For example, we are assuming that there is no pandemic that comes and starts killing majority of population. So we are assuming that there is no significant death happening in the population which can affect the population density. Okay, people, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So under these assumptions, write down next point. Under these assumptions, the population will grow in an exponential or a geometrical fashion. Under these assumptions, the population will grow in an exponential or a geometrical fashion. Okay, now let's see what's happening. So let's again define things. Let's take population size as n. So I'm defining n as the initial population size. Okay, and then I'm taking b as birth rate. I'm taking it rate. Okay, it's the rate, so it is not the total number. It's not the total birth, but it is a rate of birth. Remember, I told you how to find rate above here. This is how we find rate, birth rate, right? So it is not the total. So total number increase was 10 tigers, but the birth rate was 0.2. Okay, is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So here I'm defining birth rate. You can write in brackets. It is the per capita birth. And I take D as death rate, per capita death rates. Okay. So now, defining these things, I have to find the change in this n. Okay, initial population is changing, and in mathematics, can you tell me how do we find the change for anything? Change of, let's say, distance is rate of change of distance is known as speed. So how do we write it in physics? Physics, so everyone is studying still, right? So you can tell me. Do you remember this one expression, the differential expression?
Distance by time.
Yes, dn over dt. You understand what is this? What is d? What is d representing here?
Rate of
Change of
change of
the time
Delta.
differentiation. Yeah.
It's called delta. We can also represent it as this triangle when the change is very less, right? So it's delta, which means change. And change with respect to, so here there is delta of n, which means change of n, change of initial population upon delta of t, which means change in time. So if population is also changing and time is also changing, basically we are finding the change in the population, right, with time. And can I write it as n, which is the initial population, again the same concepts that we applied here, n into, because now it is rates. Here it was the total number of birth, deaths, immigration, emigration, everything. Here it is the rate. So we have to multiply with that rate, n into b, which is the birth rate, and this birth rate includes the immigration if there is any, and we are assuming that there is no immigration, so no new, because we are controlling the population. No, we started with 50 tigers, so either they are growing by giving birth or they are declining by dying, but we are not allowing more tigers from anywhere else to come in. Okay, because that rarely happens. So birth rate minus death rate, can I write it like this? Does this make sense, people? Question 1, does this make sense? Those who have maths. Say something, say yes or no. If I'm wrong, then you have to tell me, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So dn by dt is equal to n into b minus d, correct? Now,
Yes.
can you, yes, okay, thank you. So do you think what is this factor? So b minus d is governing this n's growth or decline, isn't it?
yes, sir.
So if b will be greater, this n will be multiplied by a positive integer and it will increase. If d will be greater, it will be negative and it will decrease, correct? So if let's say B is 10, birth rate was 10, or let's say birth rate was 2, birth rate can't go to 10 that easily, but let's say birth rate was 2, but death rate was also 2. So 2 minus 2 will be 0. So n into 0 will be 0. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So if n into 0, then this whole thing becomes 0, then dn by dt is 0. What does this means? That there is no change in the population. Whatever the population was to begin with, it will stay the same. So the population is n only. It was 50, the birth rate was 2, the death rate was 2. So there was no change. So it stays 50. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, very good. So in a way, what is this B minus D deciding? It is deciding the rate. Okay, rate of change of population. Okay, so can I write this? Can I take this B minus D as a constant, like as R? Okay, as a constant called R. If I know the birth rate and death rate for a population, unless and until I change the conditions, it will stay the same. So I can take it as R, and I can define R as intrinsic growth rate, because it is not affected by things outside. It is affected by the birth and the death within the population itself. So it's intrinsic growth rate, also known as, some books write it as rate of natural increase. Okay, because it's happening on its own within the population. Rate of natural increase or rate of natural decrease, depending on what is the value. R is positive or negative. Okay, so now I'm just redefining this population, this equation. So dn over dt change is equal to n into r. Can I say this?
Yes, sir.
Or I can just say simply dn by dt is equal to rn. Correct? The most simplistic equation. You understood how we reached here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So this is where this type of equation is called differential equation. Okay, because what are you finding? We are finding the difference, right? Sorry. Differential equation, we're finding the change. Now taking this equation, and those who have studied maths will help me if I want to convert it into an integral, because we have to do it over time, right? So this has no this is just the concept of time here, like change is here with respect to t, but I want to find nt plus 1, this thing. So I got the differential equation. If I have to if I want to derive an integral equation is nothing but just where we can integrate. We can take any time starting from a time, ending at a time, and we can form a integral form of exponential equation. Exponential growth equation. So this is our next challenge. This is the exponential growth equation. Okay, let me mark it here and tell you that this is the equation that we have to find the integral form of. Now integral form means, let's say I want to find n at time t, so that time I can decide. So it will be equal to n naught into e raised to power r and t. Now let's define what are all these parameters. So you can understand what is NT, right? NT is population density at time t. Let me first complete it, then you ask your doubts if you have any. So population density at time t. What is N naught? N0. What is N naught? Same, population density at time 0, with which we started, correct? You know what is R already. What is R? R and T, so you know,
T
right?
minus T.
In
Yes. So what is R? Intrinsic.
Intrinsic growth rate.
Yes, it is intrinsic growth rate or rate of natural increase. T I don't have to say because T I already told you. Time T is T. So if I'm finding NT, where T is the 5 years, after 5 years, so then this will be 5. Okay. What is this E here? This is the point. Anyone knows mathematics, people? E. How many have heard of base of natural log? The base of natural log. So log based equations. What does log helps us to do? The value for E is 2. If I'm not wrong, what is it? 2.772 or what is it? 2.72. People, maths. 2.7231. I'm confused here.
that value is for what, sir?
The base of the natural log. The base of natural logarithm E. Log E. You have seen this in mathematics, right? When you make integral equations, log E. One is log n, natural log. So this is the base, log E.
It's a log.
E-based equation.
So log 2 will be 2.303, but we don't really use E or something.
Okay, you don't. So 2.303 is log 2.
Log of
Okay.
2, yeah.
So, yeah. So for the base of the natural logarithms, which is E here, its value is, let me just give me 1 second. It has to be 2.72 or something. Where can I find it? Yeah. Yes, it is 2.718 to be specific. Okay, just know this. You don't have to remember it. Okay, people. So they're not going to ask you on this basis, but 2.72, I thought 2.718 very specifically. So we are multiplying it with a factor that's converting this this differential exponential growth equation into a integral form. Okay. Now let's again see if it works in our case. So here, when the rate was 0, the whole thing was 0, correct? Let's see here. If the rate of growth is 0 here, then 0 into t will be 0 and e raised to power 0. So this 2.718 raised to power 0 will be 0, correct? So n naught into 0 will be n at time t will be just, oh sorry, it will be 1 actually. If this is 0, it will be 1. So if there is no rate of, if there is no positive growth or negative decline at this time t, nt will remain as n naught. Whatever is the initial population at time 0, it will stay the same. Okay, there's some mathematics involved that you can derive, but how much time do we have? Okay, so let me first finish the models. If we are left with any doubts, then we will go into the details. Okay, let's first finish what is required. Is this part clear? This is just the way an integral form is represented. Whenever they will ask you to solve this, they will give you all these values for this equation if they ask you to solve this. Otherwise, if they don't ask you to solve specifically by this equation, you can always solve it just by this equation. dn by dt is equal to r into n. You have to find the rate of change or intrinsic growth rate based on birth rate and death rate. Is this part clear? This is more easier, right? People, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is the mathematical part, and let's see how the graph looks like. So whenever we plot a graph, we always have to first define what is the x-axis and the y-axis. So we are going to make a graph here which is n versus t graph. It is called n versus t. So n is the population density in the beginning and t is time. Okay. So as we start, let's say we start with very slow number. The population just started here. It's blue. Okay. So first it will grow slow because from 1 it will become 2, 4, 8, 16. It will grow like this slow. 32. After one point you will see that it grows like 64, 128, and it goes like this. 256, 512, 1028, things like that. So it steeply grows up, and this shape is like a J shape. So it's called a J shaped curve. So just remember, for a exponential or geometric growth, there is a J shaped curve. So in the beginning, what will happen? When time will increase, the n will increase. But after some time, with very less increase in time, you will see very high increase in n. Even lesser increase, even higher increase. Is that clear, everyone? That is called exponential growth. And that's why, that's why you can just imagine why it is not sustainable in nature. Because you cannot just keep growing in population density forever. So just write here, n is population density. Please write this. This is population density, and this is time. So the question that can come is n versus t graph for a exponential growth will look like what? Okay. This is for dn over dt is equal to rn, r into n, r dot n. Make sense, everyone? Sorry. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yeah. So any population that is growing exponentially under unlimited resources, which the best example can be, or the closest example can be, the bacterial growth in the beginning on a culture plate. So it can reach a very big population size or a very big population, high population density in very short amount of time. Okay. It also happens for viral infections in our body. So when COVID started infecting people, the growth curve of COVID was this exponential in the beginning. Do you remember, people? So even 1,000 virus particles will enter in your body. Within a few days, it will be more than billions of viral particles. So how they are dividing is 1,000 is becoming 2,000, 2,000 is becoming 4,000, 8,000, 16,000, 32,000, and so on. So within, just and viruses take very less time to replicate. They just take, a few minutes, sometimes like around 1 hour. They will make multiple millions of copies inside the cell. So does it make sense where you can apply these exponential growth models, where organisms are reproducing or replicating super fast under unlimited resource conditions, but that cannot be sustained forever in nature. Make sense?
Yes.
Yes, please note all of this down and let me know if you have any doubt about the first growth model, the exponential growth model, its graph or anything. Please let me know when you are done, okay? Write in the chat, please, when everyone is done noting. Okay, so Wafi and Samara are done. Others, Ellen, Saifullah and Maimuna? Okay, so everyone is done, correct. Cool. So this, as I said, is a ideal growth model where we assume that the resources are unlimited. But in nature, as I've told you, it never happens, right? No population of any given species, can have unlimited resources forever. So it cannot permit exponential growth, in short, correct? So then what to do? Then we have to slightly change the model and take into consideration what is the maximum population density every population can reach. Now that will depend on, again, the same factors, which is birth rate, death rate, etc., etc., which we have already defined as R. So what's different in this model? And this model is known as logistic model. Logistic growth. So what is logistic growth or logistic growth model? How can we describe population growth on this? So write down the basics, that in nature there is competition between individuals for resources, correct? It's never like there is unlimited resource and no one has to worry about anything and just keep eating, keep growing. So there is always competition among individuals for limited resources. So no population can permit exponential growth forever. Or no population can permit exponential growth. So what will happen due to competition? Just like competition, what will happen? If there is competition, finally who's gonna continue, who's gonna survive and reproduce?
The most fittest one.
Yes, so that's the law of theory of evolution, that there is always survival of the fittest. Now fittest, both like reproductive fitness and when it comes to competing other fitness. For example, if you see which population, in a population there are, let's say, some predators or tigers that are old, some are like adult and very fierce and fast. So who will survive? Who will get to hunt the deers and who will not get to hunt the deers and will perish? The fittest one, right? Those who can run faster, are still adults, correct? They will survive. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now, given that there is always a limitation on the resource, so there is enough resource to sustain a growth. So growth can be there if there are 50 tigers and just the food for 50. So if they become 60, 10 will not get food. So in that case, population will never grow at all, correct? If I start with 4 individuals and the food is only present at any given time for 4 people, there will never be a scenario where 8 or 16 can sustain. You understand? But in nature there is surplus, so population does grow. For example, every population grows. We see human population growing, we see any population which is not threatened by any danger or something grows. So there is enough resources, but every population reaches a maximum limit, maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. So beyond which, if you have to add one individual to the population, you have to remove one individual from the population. So it means only when 10 will die, 10 more can come and accommodate. So that's called the maximum limit. And in biology, we define it as nature's carrying capacity for that species. Okay, is that clear? So in logistic growth model, there is the concept of carrying capacity. So let's first define what is carrying capacity before we go further and make this model mathematically. So write down, carrying capacity is defined as the maximum possible population number in any given habitat.
Sir, can you repeat from maximum population?
Sorry, carrying capacity is defined as, what is it? Maximum possible population number. Maximum possible population number in a given habitat for every species. In a given habitat for every species, beyond which no further growth is possible. Beyond which no further growth is possible due to resource constraints. CONSTRAINTS, constraints. Due to resource constraints. Okay, due to resource constraints. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So that we define as the carrying capacity, and for representing it, I will take carrying capacity as K. Okay, I'll define it as K. Now let's make an equation including this carrying capacity. Okay, so starting with dn over dt, right? This is what we started with, and we know that it is equal to r, which is birth rate minus death rate, into n. So this is basic, right? Till here it is exponential growth only, right? So logistic growth is just a better version of exponential growth. So it will contain the exponential growth. But what is difference is that we have one, which is the maximum, minus n upon k, which is this carrying capacity. Okay, and if I solve this part mathematically, I can write it will be dn by dt. Those who have mathematics, please tell me if I'm doing right. R into n upon k minus n by k. Am I correct? Just taking the LCM and solving it. Now let me explain it to you. So this model says, or this growth says, that dn over dt, so change in n over change in time, is equal to r, which is the intrinsic rate of growth, or intrinsic rate of natural increase, multiplied by n, which was the initial population we started with, multiplied by, so there is another multiplication here, k, which is the carrying capacity, minus n. So at any given time you will never reach the carrying capacity, right? So if you reach carrying capacity, so this factor here, k minus n upon k, tells you what's going to be the change, dn over dt. So if you reach the carrying capacity, let's say this n, which is the initial capacity, reaches the carrying capacity, which is k. So this n will become k only, and k minus k will be 0, and 0 over k will become, this whole thing will become 0. And if you multiply r into n into 0, so this whole change will be 0. So if n reaches carrying capacity, which then this whole change dn by dt will be 0. Do you understand how it works? The formula?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
this
sir.
equation never ever allows n to go beyond k. That's why this whole factor has been. If it goes beyond k, then the dn by dt will be 0. Okay. So there'll be no change. Earlier, in this case, that was not the case. R, you just keep on multiplying R into n. As R increases, n increases, and it keeps on increasing. So the graph was like this. Does that make sense, everyone, mathematically? So every equation, if you have to test, just test it by putting a condition. So this equation, R into n into k minus n upon k, just tells you that n, it always will be 1 less than like the full 1. So this is the equation for logistic growth model. Anyone has any doubts? Let's define what are these things. We always should do it. So again, n is population density time t, and R, you know, is, say, growth rate, and what else? K is the carrying capacity. Please write this down. So if the question comes, which is the more realistic model in nature, exponential growth model or logistic growth model, what will you write and why? So logistic growth model is more realistic growth model in nature. And why? In why answer, you can explain the carrying capacity thing, that why no population can just exponentially keep on growing, because there will always be constraints and there will always be a maximum number of population that can sustain on that resource. Is that understood, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Great. Please note it down and then let me know. Oh, sorry, one more thing before we finish. Graph again. So again, we will make n versus t graph for logistic growth. Now, what do you expect this time? What should happen? Let me use red. So again, it will increase, like logistically also, population does increase, right? But this time, it won't go up forever. Instead, it will saturate at one particular point, right? So this point at which it saturates and never goes beyond, what do we call it? What is this value of n? What is this population density here, beyond which you never see your graph going up? Can anyone tell me? This will be the K, carrying capacity, right? Yes or no? So howsoever number of, like,
Yes, sir.
how does not matter how much time passes, population, if it reaches k, it will always stay there, because the rate of change will become 0 the moment it reaches k. So when n becomes k, k minus k upon k becomes 0, r into n into 0 becomes 0, so dn by dt becomes 0. So it never changes. Okay. If there are deaths, it can come down, but again it will reach k and stay there. So this kind of graph, where we get this, what shape do you think? It is called a S-shaped graph. This we get for logistic growth. Okay, so the equation for this graph is dn by dt is equal to r dot n dot k minus n upon k. Is it clear, everyone? Make sense?
Yes, sir.
The biology and maths both make sense to you or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please finish this and let me know when you're done. Okay, so Wafi and Sumara are done. Others? Is there any doubt, people? Anything you want to ask regarding both the models? Mamuna and Alan is also done. So, okay. So moving forward now. Okay, so apart from this, so this is the most important like conceptually part of the chapter. Apart from this, if you see this chapter, the last part is population interactions. So how do populations that we have just defined, we have studied their growth, how are these populations interacting? So when I say population interactions, I mean two different populations, which means two species or two groups which are interacting with each other. Okay, so population interactions. Now you must be knowing about when populations interact with each other, they either do it for benefit or, so for example, let's say there are two species, okay, species A and species B, which are interacting, okay, and in that interaction, the first condition is where both species A and species B are at benefit. So plus denotes benefit, okay, plus denotes benefit and minus denotes loss or disadvantage. So two species are interacting with each other and both are at benefit. So what will we call this kind of interaction? It's called mutualism. One example is where you have studied symbiotic relationship. Remember, a mutual relationship between two organisms where both are at benefit. Lichen. Remember lichen, people?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there, both the mycobiont and the phycobiont, the algal and the fungal partner, both had benefits. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Great. There can be conditions where both are at loss. So there is an interaction where both are at loss. When will that happen? Any idea? Any interaction which you can think of where both at loss, which means at loss means both have to what do you say? Both have to incur some loss. Both have to settle for something less than they could have got. So this kind of interaction is called competition. In a competitive model where you make two species compete with each other for one resource, both will end up getting some kind of a disadvantage over time. Okay, so in nature, lots of competition is to remove competition. They settle for specific target. So if there's a competition between two herbivores for the same grass, so over time either one will shift to the other, or they will change the place, or they will shift to another kind of grass, or to just get rid of competition. That's better. Okay, I'm just summarizing it first, then we'll go into detail. There are also conditions where one it has benefit. This is the most common ones in nature, and one is at loss when they interact. Can you tell me when this happens? This happens in two states. One we know, predation. When a tiger interacts with a deer, tiger is at benefit and deer is always at loss because there is a predation interaction. It also happens in parasitism. You know what is parasitism? People, anyone? Parasitism. No one. Okay. So parasitism is where parasites are there. So parasites are of two types: ectoparasites and endoparasites. And the question now is, if the interaction is similar, what is the difference between predation and parasitism? What is the difference? Anyone tell me the difference between the two? If not, then no one will tell, then we'll discuss it in the next class, where again I'll ask you people. There are other conditions where one is at benefit, other has no effect. So 0 means no effect, neither loss nor benefit. So if one is at benefit, other has nothing to gain or lose from it. It's called commensalism. There are examples of every interaction in nature, which we will discuss in detail in the next class. And the last interaction is where one species or one group is at loss, another has nothing to get from it. Okay, that's called amensalism. These are all permutation combinations of interactions. Interaction where both don't have anything to gain from it is not an interaction then. Okay, so it can never be 0-0 anywhere. Okay, because that's not an interaction. You are not at all interacting. Interaction should have an effect on either one or both the species. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Now in the next class, I want you to go and read from your NCERT this part, population interactions. Okay, this is the last part of your NCERT. It has examples for every such interaction and explained in a way. So in the next class, we'll finish this chapter and we'll start with the new chapter.